any second. Okay. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where in the world you might be joining us. And thanks to technology, you might be anywhere in the world. But my name is Kevin Mahan. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Jensen. Thank you for joining us. I am joined here today with Don Cornell. I think many of you probably know is one of the people that was instrumental in the MiYO liquid ceramic material that Don has really, in 4 years, not only taken North America by storm, but it's really taken the world by storm, which is kind of an exciting thing to be a part of, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's was the perfect material at the right time. You know, I mean, kind of the entire industry needed a material that could make the proliferation of monolithic restorations look better, and technicians are always striving to do, you know, the highest aesthetic results possible. And you know, before MiYO, that there wasn't much really out there to help them do that. So yeah, it was
Absolutely.
was really a great confluence of need and end result.
Yeah. And I know a lot of work went into, you know, not only the conception, but the realization of MiYO, which, as I mentioned, believe it or not, was already 4 years ago, although in many ways it only feels like a year ago. But even though all that work went into it, what I think is also really exciting is the evolution of the material and the advancement of technology and combining that with material development as well. So one of the things I thought we could talk about, or the thing I thought we could talk about today, Don, was something not everybody knows about, but it's probably been, what, a year and a half since we launched high fusing structure materials?
Yep.
And not everybody knows about them and why we developed them. So I figured let's talk to you about it, right? Because you were one of the people instrumental in making them a reality. So why don't you share with folks what they are and what they're intended to do?
Well, happy to do that. I think, first of all, I think structure is kind of misunderstood and maybe in many instances unappreciated. I think that monolithic restorations, as we kind of migrate from predominantly posterior teeth to also include anterior teeth, I think the monolithic restorations, especially in the aesthetic zone, benefit greatly from the ability to create complex surface texture, morphology, have a very dense and polishable or surface to get the right sheen and texture that you want to have. And structure was designed really to do that. And you know, as more and more laboratories are replacing their layered anterior aesthetic restorations with monolithic, I think they start to see the value and really start extending themselves into the structure material. And it's an amazing material. You know, I mean, it's if you've never had experience with composite, it can be a little tricky at first if you're a layering ceramist. But for those that have experience with working with composite materials, the consistency of the structure is very familiar to them. And it's very flexible. I mean, once you put it on, you can texture it with a brush and fire it, and that texture will remain. Or you can apply it the same way you would apply a normal layering ceramic. And by that, I mean, you just put a very thin coat on, fire it, and then mechanically texture it, and then do a quick up and down that way. That's an important, I wanted to get that piece out first before I go into the high structure, because that's kind of at the heart of why the high temperature structure was developed. As laboratories start extending the uses for the MiYO system beyond single units, from beyond posterior into anterior, and certainly we see this explosion right now of all-on-4 type cases with teeth and tissue. So early on, a high temperature structure was really kind of imagined more for all on four cases. So just when you look at how all on four cases are typically processed, you put your MiYO color on your teeth, put your MiYO color on your tissue. And then of course the structure for teeth is enamel looking and the structure for tissue is pink. And so you generally process those in separate firings. And it became kind of apparent pretty quickly that we needed a bigger separation in firing temperature between the structure for teeth and the structure for tissue, so that whatever surface texture and morphology and form that you created on the teeth using the structure material, that would remain intact and remain very sharp and detailed even after firing the structure for tissue, which would generally happen in a subsequent firing. So it was originally kind of imagined that way, but it kind of opened the door for a lot of other very practical uses. I mean, a lot of laboratories will get a restoration back from a dentist. Maybe it needs a contact, maybe needs a line angle changed or some other things. And you've got this beautiful texture that you've already kind of established. If you need to go back into the furnace and add the contact and things like that, then with the lower temperature structure, all of that texture, some of the line, some of the maybe form, especially the very precise form or detail that you might have placed at an incisal edge, for example, could potentially be lost by going back up into the furnace. And every ceramist knows this from classic layering materials. So, you know, we certainly, with the development of the high temperature structure, found that by using the high temperature structure, it gave you a fallback position if you needed to change something after you were finally done and glazed, either before it left the laboratory or after it came, you know, if it potentially came back from the dentist's office and required some corrections. Whatever you would put there originally in the high temperature structure would remain as long as you use the lower temperature structure as a correction material. So give you another option, gave you more flexibility. And frankly, to be honest with you, I find that the high temperature structure is actually much easier to use, a much better material, a little bit denser than the lower temperature material. Lower temperature material is perfectly fine. It's just that I think when you play with the two, you'll find that the high temperature structure is really, really very, very nice material.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up, you know, the fact that, you know, structure is probably one of the most misunderstood materials in the kit. And I think some of that stems from where, you know, clients or how clients are using MiYO. Some are using it as an upgrade or replacement for stain and glaze, you know, going to a liquid ceramic with really no additional effort, but getting a more vital, you know, restoration. But the onset of going monolithic in the anterior region, which I know is for a lot of folks a little scary, that really is what structure was designed for, as you said, because not everybody is capable or wants to put the texture in the zirconia in the green state, right, or in lithium disilicate. And you know, get their texture that way. They want greater detail, I think, right? And if you've got to glaze over that, that's a challenge, or color over it, right?
Yeah, I mean, glazing over it is not difficult, but for example, if you put quite a bit of surface detail into a green state zirconia, and then you center that, and now you are trying to place very small and very exact details, for example, in the incisal, you're working in a surface that's very irregular potentially, right? And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky. I also think there's real and very there's a realized value in placing that 1/10 of a millimeter of structure over the surface. The reason for that is because, you know, there's my favorite structure is enamel. There's a little bit of milkiness to that, like a typical enamel would be. You will see kind of an enamel effect, the same kind of filtration in 1/10 of a millimeter from, say, enamel structure, as you would see in 5 or 6/10 of a millimeter of regular layering enamel. And we're not trying to replicate that same thickness by any means, but that filtration and that scattering of light and everything else kind of gives you a little extra something that you don't normally get from just a typical glaze. So, and you get the ability to really polish that material. I would be a little scared to polish over something that was surface textured in the green state and then MiYO color and maybe a thin layer of glaze over the top of that.
Right.
That could be a little tricky sometimes. I know lots of people that do it and do an amazing job with that, but yeah, my preference has always been for the structure.
That's a good point. So structure is self-glazing, obviously, right?
Yeah.
As you said, it's a very dense material, and it is amazing, in only 1/10 of a millimeter, all that it can bring to the vitality, right, and aesthetics of a restoration. And Don, you've seen it. I mean, I've seen it personally in the last few months where finally somebody who's using MiYO, they have that aha moment and realize not only what structure really is intended for, but how to apply it successfully. And that just kind of unlocks the floodgates for them to now, create even more vital restorations with MiYO, because it's not the missing link, but it just, once they get it, it's fun to see them really take off and understand what it was intended for. And I know you got a couple pictures to show. We're only going to be on here for 15, 18 minutes or so. But one thing I have heard customers say is that they get a more accurate result at a little bit higher temperature with the high fusing structure. Is that because furnaces aren't really designed to be accurate down at 700, 710 degrees where, our regular structure fires?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, one of the considerations was the furnace itself, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of variables when it comes to firing ceramic. There's the furnace, not only from one manufacturer to another, but believe it or not, even within the same manufacturer, you could have 10 examples of exactly the same furnace, and they will all fire just a little bit different, even if they're all calibrated and supposedly all the same. They just do, and that's the nature of the beast. What you see on the computer that tells you, no, it's going to this temperature, everything else. Yeah. So, and you got to kind of use your eyes and you got to kind of judge that. But yeah, okay. Most of your furnaces, there are some that have the ability to really manage heat or, measure heat at the low range, but most of them are set up to really function kind of from the mid 700s up to the mid 900s, somewhere in that range. So when the furnace is asked to be, temperature accurate at 700, 695, the furnace can float a little bit. And so sure. When you're talking about a low temperature material, the difference of 5 degrees can be huge. So the high temperature structure at 770, 760, 770, it's much easier for the furnaces to deal with that.
Perfect. That was the question I was just going to ask. So you answered it. Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen for a minute, and I thought we could I know there were a couple of pictures that you wanted to show. This is what the jars look like of the high fusing, so you can tell the difference, right? So you don't confuse it with the regular structure. But this was a picture that you had sent over. I know you wanted to make a comment on it. Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on the one central on number 9, you can see the light really captures the surface texture in the incisal half. So if you look at the tissue, you can tell there's really no texture on that. So what you're looking at is a case, an all-on-4 case that's been processed to the point where The structure on the teeth has been applied and textured, and final, this is how it appeared as it came out of the oven. So you can see the complex surface texture that's established there. Again, in this particular image, you'll note that there's really no structure on the tissue. So obviously the question is, you know, if we were using low temperature structure on the teeth, and now we had to place the low temperature structure on the tissue, we'd in all likelihood lose some of, if not a majority of, the texture that's in the structure on the teeth. But if you go to the next picture, you'll see that with the high temperature structure, and again, not taken from the same angle, but this is the best one I could get. You can also see the way the light is bouncing off number 9, that texture that's in the incisal third is still there, even though obviously the structure for the tissue has been applied and the entire restoration has gone through the furnace again, and yet the texture from the teeth remains completely unchanged. And that was really the goal. And again, as I said earlier, even if this wasn't a big case like this, if you had a single unit or you had some anterior teeth, and you textured them up beautifully and you sent it out, and it came back and the dentist said, you know, can you warm them up a little bit and add a little A shade to them, or can you maybe lighten them with a little bit of lumen? You could go ahead and do that right over the top of the structure and fire that, and the surface texture wouldn't change. So essentially you'd be adding a little color, just like we traditionally did with layered restoration. It'd be no different. So that's kind of the flexibility. It's the beauty of the high temperature material. It just gives you a lot of flexibility we didn't have with the regular temperature material.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and thank you for sharing that. We've got, you know, for those of you that don't have high fusing structure, it's easy. It comes, Don, it's in high fusing structure enamel, and also I think we've got window as well, correct? But
yep, correct.
But enamel is, as you mentioned, is your go-to. We've got those programs, those firing programs dialed in pretty well, depending on what furnace and what environment you're in. So you can reach out to our technical department to get some help with that. But I thought it was important just to call some attention to this, you know, what we call a new material. It's been out for a little while, but not a lot of people know about it, and it's makes a big difference in the laboratories when people understand it and use it, as you demonstrated. So thanks for taking some time with us today to kind of uncover what high fusing structure is and what it's intended to do, and you know, the kind of results you can get with it. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no, happy to do it.
We look forward to other advancements and other news in MiYO. I know you're working hard on a bunch of fun things you can't talk about. We'll tease a little bit, but you and everybody involved, I know, is hard at work. So thanks for you know, for not only making a great product, but continuing to evolve it as well. I know everybody's excited.
No, it's been a fun project, and it continues to be. And like you say, we look forward to some of the new things that are coming down the line. It should be fun.
Awesome. Don, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, reach out to certainly your sales consultant at Jensen or myself. We are very happy to chat with you. So thanks again for joining us, or if you watch this later, thanks for checking it out. High fusing structure. We will talk soon, Don. Take care.
Thanks, dear. Bye.